Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we explore the stories behind the trends shaping our world. Today, we are strapping ourselves in, really, for a massive cultural and, well, logistical journey. We're stepping into the world of Oktoberfest 2025.
Yeah, it's definitely an event you could easily just write off as, a big 2-week party. But when you look closer, like we have, the source material shows it's actually this really sophisticated 2-century-old cultural thing. And a huge economic engine, too.
Huge is right. We're talking something like 6 million visitors expected just in Munich.
That's the number, yeah. Generating billions of euros. And it's all sort of orchestrated around these folk traditions that go way back to the Napoleonic era, believe it or not.
Absolutely. And that tension, that's what's fascinating, isn't it? Between the really deep historical tradition and then, well, the demands of modern mass tourism.
Yeah.
Things like sustainability, high-tech security, global social media watching everything.
Right. That's where the story gets really complex, I think.
So our mission today is pretty much to unpack exactly how all that works. How does it hold together?
We'll need to explore the sheer logistics involved. I mean, managing an event the size of a small country's population all in one field, it's mind-boggling. And also look at what happens when this Bavarian brand goes global. What does that mean for, like, cultural authenticity? It really is the ultimate lesson, maybe, in preservation being powered by adaptation. You have to change to stay the same, in a way.
Okay, let's get started on that analysis then. Just a quick heads up before we really dive in. Next time we're shifting gears completely. Moving from Bavarian beer halls to a galaxy far, far away with The Mandalorian and Grogu 2026.
Quite the shift.
Definitely. But for now, let's explore the world of the Theresienweiss. Right, so to really understand the modern behemoth that Oktoberfest is now, we have to go back, start with the history, the core of it. It didn't begin as some big commercial festival, did it? It was a specific event, a royal celebration in Munich, way back in 1810.
Yeah, that specific starting point is, I think, key to why it's lasted so long. It was October 1810. The whole thing kicked off to celebrate the wedding of Crown Prince Ludwig. He later became King Ludwig I and Princess Therese of Saxe-Hildburghausen.
Right.
And it wasn't just a royal affair. The citizens of Munich were actually invited to join in the festivities. It all finished with this massive public horse race.
And the place where it all happened, that became sort of the anchor point, didn't it? Geographically speaking.
Precisely. The fields, the open space they used for the celebration, they were named the Theresienweiss right afterwards.
Teresa's Meadow.
In honor of the bride, yeah. And that name, Theresienweiss, or just Weisen for short, it still stands today. The location hasn't really changed in over 200 years.
Wow.
That gives the whole thing this incredible sense of continuity of heritage that, most modern festivals just can't even touch.
And the sources seem to suggest that it turned into an annual thing pretty quickly. It wasn't just a one-off. Surprisingly fast, yeah. Which tells you something about, I guess, the public appetite back then for this kind of communal tradition. It was immediate and clearly powerful.
So when did it become official, like an annual event run by the city?
Well, by 1819, the city of Munich actually took over, managing it. They decided, right, let's do this every year, and that really set the blueprint. Not just remembering the wedding, but making it this ongoing annual folk fair, a Volksfest. They started adding things like agricultural shows, fairground rides, and crucially, beer.
Ah, the beer. Can't forget the beer.
Definitely not. But, the journey from that early 19th century fair to the global powerhouse it is today, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
No, I imagine not. 2 centuries is a long time. Lots of history happened.
Absolutely vital context. We see these key phases of evolution. The sources show that pretty early on, they started adding more amusement rides, bigger drinking halls, building that fairground feel we recognize now. But then the 20th century threw everything at it. The ultimate stress tests, really.
Like the wars. Exactly. The festival got canceled multiple times, during both world wars, obviously, but also during periods of, crazy hyperinflation in the 20s and even cholera epidemics earlier on.
So every time it came back, it was like a deliberate statement, reinforcing its importance.
I think so, yeah. A conscious act of cultural reassertion. It showed how important it was to the Bavarian identity.
And did those crises shape any of the traditions we see today?
They definitely cemented some things, like the really strict rules about what kind of beer can actually be served there. Those got solidified over time.
Right. It's not just any beer, is it?
No way. We're talking specifically Münchner beer, Munich beer, brewed under the super strict standards of the Reinheitsgebot.
That's the German beer purity law from, 1516?
That's the one, restricting ingredients basically to water, barley, and hops. Yeast was allowed later, obviously. Yeah. This whole regulatory thing protects the quality, but also the exclusivity of the beer you get at the Wiesn.
Okay, so that purity law, the specific beer, That brings us to the core pillars, the things that really define the atmosphere, the traditions. Beyond the beer, we have those massive
It's
tents.
tense, yeah, they're like the heartbeat of the whole thing. But also kind of the economic oligarchy, you could say.
14 major ones you mentioned.
14 main ones, yeah, for 2025. And they are run exclusively by these historic Munich breweries. Names people know globally now, like Hofbräu, Augustiner, Polaner.
And the city regulates this pretty heavily.
Oh, totally. It means your big global beer conglomerates, they're just shut out. By design, the festival is tied directly, intrinsically, to the legacy and identity of Munich's own brewing tradition.
So when people talk about commercialization at Oktoberfest, it's not really a free-for-all market. It's more like this very powerful, very localized monopoly controlling things.
Exactly, a very specific kind of commercialization. And you see that economic power visually reinforced, too, with the traditional costumes.
The dirndls and lederhosens.
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize these aren't just, funny costumes for tourists to wear. They're actual traditional Bavarian clothes. The fact that so many locals and even many visitors really commit to wearing them properly, that elevates the whole atmosphere way beyond your standard modern carnival.
And we should probably remember the fair part, too. It's a Volksfest, a folk festival. It's not just about drinking beer in tents.
That's crucial to remember, absolutely. It's still very much a family-friendly event in many ways. Alongside those enormous beer tents, you've got parades, lots of traditional Bavarian music, big carnival rides. Some of them are actually quite old, dating back decades.
So it keeps those community roots.
Exactly. That multifaceted approach stops it from becoming solely about, the massive beer sales. It keeps that connection to being a proper folk festival.
Okay, let's jump forward then. To the present day, or near enough, Oktoberfest 2025. This is where the scale just gets, well, almost unbelievable. Can we get into the numbers, the modern operation?
We really have to. The expected attendance, just in Munich, is around 6 million visitors.
6 million.
Packed into just 2, maybe 3 weeks starting in late September.
Yeah.
And that huge number of people drives this massive tourism impact. Analysts usually put it at, billions of euros, often reported as over 1.2 billion euros going into Bavaria's economy every year from this one event.
Wow. And that money, it's not just flowing straight to the breweries, is it? Where does the research say those billions actually go?
Well, the revenue streams are pretty complex.
Yeah.
The city charges substantial fees just for using the land, the Wiesen. That helps cover infrastructure costs, building temporary water lines, power grids, security, fencing, all that.
Okay.
Then there's employment. A huge chunk goes there. The event creates tens of thousands of temporary jobs, servers, security, cleaners, ride operators.
Right.
Plus, you've got the massive knock-on effect for the local economy outside the festival grounds.
Yeah.
Hotels, restaurants, public transport, shops. They all see huge boosts. It's like a regional GDP spike concentrated into 3 weeks.
Managing 6 million people, though, that sounds like it needs some serious precision engineering. You mentioned technology earlier as a key tool for adapting. What kind of logistical challenges are they solving with, 21st century tech?
It's basically the hidden infrastructure that lets the historical fantasy play out smoothly. I mean, take something like resource consumption. One fascinating metric we found was waste. Just think about the waste generated.
Oh, yeah.
Thousands of tons of refuse. The logistics just for separating, collecting, and transporting that amount every single day requires these highly optimized routes, capacity planning. They often use sensor technology now, feeding data back to a central command center.
So tech is literally stopping the place from drowning in its own success, physically speaking. What about for the visitors directly?
That's where the apps come in, and they do way more now than just booking a table.
Ah, yes, the smartphone reservations meeting the traditional beer steins.
Exactly. Reserving a table in one of those massive tents, some hold up to 10,000 people, that's still crucial and hard to get.
10,000 people in one tent.
Oh, yeah. But the apps now integrate real-time capacity info for all the tents. They give data to help manage crowd flow, send out traffic warnings for the U-Bahn or S-Bahn, push safety alerts.
So the organizers can react on the fly.
Dynamically respond to how the crowds are shifting, yeah. It helps maintain safety without totally killing that traditional, bustling, maybe slightly chaotic atmosphere.
And security must be a huge factor now, especially since, wasn't there a terrible incident back in the 80s?
There was a tragic bombing in 1980. And yes, security since then has become a massive, very visible feature. It's fundamentally changed how the event operates. If you connect this to the bigger picture, like we were saying, trying to host 6 million people today just demands state-of-the-art security that was, frankly, unthinkable back even a few decades ago, let alone in the 19th century.
So what does that look like on the ground?
Things like perimeter fencing all around the Wiesen, mandatory bag checks at entrances, and a really significant police and private security presence. The sources suggest there's this constant push-pull. implementing stronger security measures while trying really hard not to completely undermine that spirit of an open, carefree folk festival. The very delicate balancing act. An operational tightrope walk, really.
We also saw mentions of sustainability commitments. How does a temporary city essentially try to lessen its huge environmental footprint?
Yeah, the sources do confirm some clear initiatives there. A big one is energy use. The major tents are often required now to run on 100% certified renewable energy.
Interesting.
Plus, there's a strong focus on sourcing food locally whenever possible and mandating organic options where they can. And they're also definitely responding to modern trends by really expanding the availability and promotion of non-alcoholic drinks, making sure the event stays inclusive, adaptable to changing health preferences.
It really is a fascinating paradox, isn't it? The whole success relies on this incredibly meticulous organization of temporary infrastructure.
All just to allow millions of people to take part in a 2-century-old tradition that often feels spontaneous and, rooted in a simpler time.
It's absolute proof that tradition doesn't have to mean stagnation. Not at all. It means you preserve the core experience while completely overhauling the machinery that makes it possible on that scale. #, internet theories, and cultural interpretations.
Okay, so when an event, an institution really, it reaches this kind of operational scale and cultural resonance, it inevitably spills over its original borders, right?
Sure.
And that invites all sorts of global debate about authenticity, commerce, culture.
Absolutely. That global spread is one of the defining things about modern Oktoberfest. Munich is still, without question, the epicenter. Nobody disputes that. But the whole concept, the brand, has been successfully exported all over the world. We see big Oktoberfest events in the U.S., especially in cities with strong German heritage, like Cincinnati or Milwaukee.
Right.
But also big ones in Canada. Brazil, Blumenau has a massive one. Australia, even various countries across Asia. And that kind of mass adoption, it immediately throws up cultural questions, doesn't it? Like when Munich exports its folk festival to Sydney or Sao Paulo or wherever.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing, a positive cultural exchange, or is it just watering down the original heritage?
Well, this definitely raises that important question, and cultural analysts are pretty divided on it.
Huh.
You've got one side, the supporters, who see these international versions as, successful examples of cultural sharing. They argue it lets diverse populations join in a piece of Bavarian heritage, maybe foster some global goodwill. It's seen as a positive celebration, a shared way to have fun.
But then you have the critics, and their voices come through pretty strongly in our sources, too. They argue these global spin-offs inevitably lose authenticity. They become like thin commercial copies.
Yeah, the argument is that the crucial context gets stripped away. You don't have the historic Munich breweries involved, usually. You certainly don't have the Theresienweiss grounds. You don't have that specific Bavarian regional history baked in. So the global copies often end up feeling more like generic beer parties, where the actual cultural meaning of the costumes, the music, the food, it kind of gets lost.
And that connects right back to critiques aimed at the Munich event itself, doesn't it? The unavoidable flip side of massive economic success, commercialization, and over-tourism.
Definitely. Critics often point to the rising prices, especially for beer, as the biggest problem for local participation. The data suggests the price of a Maß, that 1-liter stein of beer, has shot up way faster than inflation in recent decades, which basically makes the whole experience feel like a luxury item, maybe even unaffordable for some of the ordinary Bavarian citizens who are, historically, the foundation of the Volksfest.
And the strain on Munich itself must be huge during those weeks. Over-tourism is a buzzword, but what does it actually mean for the city?
It means seriously congested public transport. It means hotel prices go through the roof, which can push out other tourists or business travelers. It puts a strain on local services, water, waste disposal, policing. The sheer demand for resources can temporarily stretch the city's capacity. Plus, that dominance of the 14 big breweries, while traditional, is sometimes seen as, well, anti-competitive. It restricts innovation, maybe, or makes it hard for smaller local businesses to get involved.
Okay, let's pivot a bit now to how this massive cultural thing lives and breathes online. Because this is where it gets really interesting, I think. How a simple photo of an oversized beer stein can become, like, global currency.
Oh, the internet doesn't just report on Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
It actively shapes how people see the brand. The festival is just perfectly made for viral content, isn't it?
Totally.
The visual shorthand is instant. You've got the striking traditional costumes, the sheer size of the Maß, that communal, slightly chaotic energy. It's all very photogenic or videogenic.
And the sources specifically mentioned international mishaps, often going viral.
Yes. That kind of content, Easily digestible, often funny photos or short clips of international visitors maybe struggling to figure out the specific cultural rules, or wrestling with those giant steins, or wearing the costumes slightly wrong.
Right.
That stuff fuels online engagement like crazy. It drives millions of views and reinforces that global, high-energy, maybe slightly silly brand of the festival.
And that visual signature, the oversized stein, it's like the ultimate free marketing tool, isn't it? It crosses language barriers, instantly says big fun.
It's intensely memeable. The stein may be held awkwardly or someone trying to lift several at once. It becomes this digital symbol that keeps Oktoberfest visible all year round. Not just in September or October, but of course that high visibility comes with intense scrutiny, which leads us straight into that whole debate about authenticity versus appropriation, especially when it comes to the traditional clothing.
Yeah, the dirndl and lederhosen debate. That seems to be the most heated discussion online, maybe. When those outfits travel from Bavaria to Brooklyn or Brisbane, the meaning changes for some people.
Well, the visual simplicity of the clothes hides some pretty deep historical and regional meaning. Analysts point out this real tension. Is someone wearing, say, a dirndl outside Bavaria just engaging in harmless cultural appreciation? Or are they basically turning up to a superficial costume party that reduces something meaningful into just a disposable fashion trend?
The online arguments often seem to boil down to whether the person wearing it understands any of the history or context, or if they're just using the outfit as, like, a prop for Instagram.
The sources really highlight that context seems to be everything in this debate. If the event itself is a genuine cultural celebration, maybe with some local German or Bavarian community ties, then wearing the clothing is often seen as participation, as respectful. But if it's just a purely generic commercial beer event with no real cultural anchor, that's when the criticism of appropriation gets much louder.
And the internet just amplifies all of that judgment.
Massively. Images get dissected and criticized instantly worldwide. It forces organizers and even participants to be way more conscious about cultural integrity than they probably had to be even 10 or 15 years ago.
So it's like the event's global expansion and its digital success are totally intertwined.
Yeah.
But that very visibility invites the scrutiny that then questions the integrity of the whole tradition. It's this fascinating kind of vicious cycle.
It really is the paradox of modern cultural success, isn't it? To be known globally, you have to be visible, you have to be shareable online, but to keep your integrity, you somehow have to resist being flattened out by that same visibility.
Right, so we've established Oktoberfest as this, well, monumental thing. It's survived economic collapses, world wars, huge technological shifts. So the big question for anyone trying to understand this trend is, why? Why does this 19th century folk festival not just hang on, but actually thrive as a global phenomenon in 2025?
I think its endurance really comes down to mastering a balancing act. It stays relevant by fiercely preserving its core historical elements, the specific location, the Theresian wise, the traditional tents run by Munich breweries, the costumes, the specific beer rules. But at the same time, it adopts modern tools. Not to fundamentally change that core experience, but actually to enable that experience to happen on a massive modern scale.
So it's the machinery, the infrastructure that evolves constantly, not the actual identity of the event.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how successfully they've integrated this deeply rooted 19th century royal tradition into the world of modern global mass tourism. The tradition provides the soul, the story, the authenticity that people, especially today, seem to crave. And the modernization, the high-tech apps for crowd control, the sophisticated security, the complex waste management we talked about that provides the logistical muscle and the safety needed to host millions of people without total chaos. They've basically perfected the art of operationalizing history.
I wonder, though, does the source material touch on whether there's a tipping point? A point where maybe the increasing security presence starts to actively undermine that authentic Volksfest feeling they're trying so hard to preserve.
That tension is definitely there, yeah. Analysts do point out that things like the very visible bag checks, the fencing around the perimeter, the sheer number of police officers, it does subtly change the psychology of the event. While everyone understands it's essential for safety, these measures can introduce a more controlled, maybe slightly institutionalized feeling, which is kind of the opposite of that original spontaneous agricultural fair vibe.
So there's a trade-off.
Absolutely. The trade-off for being able to safely host 6 million people seems to be a sort of measured loss of that completely unbridled local spontaneity.
And yet, despite that, the global demand keeps growing, which suggests it must be tapping into something more fundamental in people than just, wanting to drink a lot of beer.
Well, I think it absolutely does. In our increasingly digital, maybe fragmented world, the way Oktoberfest is spread globally shows there's still this profound, shared human desire for collective gatherings, for physically being together in a ritualistic way. People seem drawn to the sheer scale, but also the history. You feel like you're not just attending some random commercial event, you're participating in a tradition that connects you, somehow, to millions of others across space and time.
Right.
That shared experience, underpinned by real historical context, is incredibly powerful. And it seems to be something that translates surprisingly well across different cultures.
So pulling it all together then, what does the success story of Oktoberfest teach us about how cultural heritage can survive and even adapt in today's globalized world?
I think it teaches us that being too rigid is fatal. If you don't adapt at all, you become irrelevant, a museum piece. But being completely rootless is also fatal. If you lose your core identity, you just become generic. Cultural heritage, it seems, needs to be flexible enough to allow for global participation. That's the cultural sharing bit, the part that builds the global brand. But crucially, it must hold on to a clear, defined anchor. Munich has to remain the undeniable epicenter, the place where the historical rules are still enforced, where the heritage is actually lived, not just, copied as a theme.
So that authenticity, locked down by the historic breweries and the specific location, that's the core value.
That's the core value proposition, I'd argue. It's what keeps the global copies from ever truly overtaking the original. It maintains that unique selling point.
So for you, the listener, the takeaway here is probably to look critically at any big cultural event like this. You need to look beyond just the surface level stuff.
Exactly. When you encounter an event on this scale, try to move past just the beer and the costumes, as fun as they are. Look for the complex economic structures. Who holds the power? Like the brewery oligarchy in Munich, where does the money really flow, those billions of euros? Think about the incredibly intricate logistical planning needed for crowd control, for resource management, and the social structures dealing with safety, sustainability, cultural debates.
It's a whole ecosystem.
It really is. Oktoberfest is like a master class in how to turn centuries of history into a highly efficient, incredibly high-revenue global brand. An operational miracle, you could say, built entirely around a horse race from 1810.
An incredibly complex and perhaps surprisingly robust machine. Indeed. Hashtag outro. And that brings us pretty much to the end of our exploration into the sheer scale and the fascinating contradictions of Oktoberfest 2025. It really is a stunning example of an event that somehow proves you can successfully honor 2 centuries of history while, at the same time, using things like predictive security modeling and smartphone reservation systems.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Thinking ahead, given how fast global brands homogenize and technology takes over, 50 years from now, what will be driving Oktoberfest's success? Will it still be the enduring power of that specific Bavarian tradition? Or will it be more about the unstoppable global marketing power of the oversized beer stein, just as a universally recognized, highly reproducible international symbol of fun?
A truly provocative thought. Perhaps best mulled over while reviewing those municipal reports on waste management volumes you mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us today as we unpack these incredibly rich sources on Oktoberfest.
Always a pleasure to walk that fine line between heritage and large-scale logistics.
Indeed. Next time, remember, we're shifting from Bavarian beer halls to a galaxy far, far away with The Mandalorian and Grogu 2026. Until then, stay curious.